Hi. This week we have a really juicy topic. We're talking about how can you as a parent contain screen time. And in this video, I'm going to give you some facts and figures that I think you'll find interesting. I'm going to share what I did, and I'm also going to give you some questions that are going to help you um, expand your kind of idea of ways forward for for solving screen time for your family. Because if it is a struggle for you, and honestly it pretty much is for every single family, every single parent that I speak with, um, often we have a kind of quite a often there's quite a limited view of what's going to solve it. I need to bring in more boundaries. I need to set more limits. And of course, that is part of the solution. But actually, the solution is much bigger than this. And when you take a broader, more expanded view, it doesn't seem so daunting. It's not just about a crackdown. I'm just going to dismiss as something that's popped up there. So that's what we're doing today. And yes, if you don't know me, I'm Una Alexander, and I help parents like you who are on their knees sometimes with children's behaviour. And if one thing can bring us to our knees, it can be screen time squabbles. And I help you find collaborative ways forward, connected ways forward that help you create a happier family life for everyone in your family. So, if you're watching this, you're probably already aware of the impact that screens can have on children's mental health. This is something that is talked about quite a lot, and I think we not only, can read about it in the media and read books and so on, but I think we feel it as parents. I mean, I don't know about you, but most of the parents I speak to feel deeply uncomfortable when they see their children on screens for extended amounts of time. There's something about it where it just doesn't feel wholesome. You probably want your child to be engaging with real objects, with real people, with real animals and so on. And when it's going on for a long time, it can feel just deeply uncomfortable. And then, of course, there's this the knowledge today that we have that it impacts mental health and that we are in a crisis, really, in terms of children's mental health today. But did you know this, that it has now been, the WHO has now said that the amount of screen time, so screen use and the amount of screen use actually also is affecting bodily issues, and as such is a public health matter. So not just a question, not that mental health is a small question, but it isn't just a question of mental health, it's also a question of physical health. And the kinds of systems that can be impacted are, for example, the storage of bodily fat, susceptibility to type 2 diabetes, the development of short-sightedness in children, and what else was there? Yeah, impulse control, and it can impact changes, can cause changes in brain structure. So quite a lot of things. And if you're UK based, you'll probably be interested to hear about a recent global study, well, interested or horrified to hear that a recent global study showed that British children are second in the whole world in terms of excessive screen use. And that is counting, so kind of optional screen use, so not to do with doing homework and things like that. So that's quite shocking. I found that quite shocking. And here's another study. Yeah, a very recent one from 2020 from the WHO, showing that a high proportion of children and adolescents in England this time have problematic screen use. And there are various categories, and one of the categories is gaming and boys, and that shows that at 11 years, 17% of our boys here in England, so I'm in England, just outside London, have problematic gaming habits, and 21% of 13-year-olds. So again, they're quite shocking statistics. So what can we do about this? And first of all, I just want to say, don't panic. Like, don't panic, because you can find a way forward. And I'll be helping you with this, because I'm not going to just do this video today. I'm going to be doing another one next week to continue on this topic. You do have the power to make changes, and that doesn't need to kind of cause World War II to break out in your family, okay? And also, don't blame yourself, because this is a global problem, and screens and the videos and games and so on that are on them are designed to be addictive. They are created with this in mind. So if your children are susceptible, and if this has kind of come into your family, you really aren't to blame, because this is what these things are designed to do, and you probably had good reasons to allow this in your family. Apart from the pressure from children, probably you were overstretched, you needed a digital babysitter, and during COVID, I mean, what can one say? Screens were a lifesaver in many cases. And so yeah, as we emerge from that, I think it's timely to look at how we can kind of pull that back in a way that that works for you and your children. So I'm not going to give guidance in this week or next week about the amount of time children should spend on screens, because I think that's something for you to work out with your children and in your circumstances, and it changes. Well, and there's so many different views on this anyway. What I did was that I didn't actually allow my son to go on a screen until he was about 9 years old. And I think this was good. I mean, I think his resourcefulness and, he's quite an initiative taker. And I think that had a role to play in that. But I'm not going to be advocating this, because I don't think that's realistic for most families. And also, time has moved on since then, and screens are even and much more a part of our lives than even they were back then. Even if that's just 10 years ago or 15. And I think it's about creating a collaborative way forward with your children, rather than being, draconian or dogmatic about it, and balancing different needs. If that sounds like a good idea to you, give me a thumbs up. And what I'm going to do next is ask you some questions. And next week, I'm going to share some ways forward. And these questions and the ways forward that I'm going to share next week, they kind of go together. I just really, before I share these questions, I really want to say that I really don't want you to have knee-jerk response to this, or kind of feel that panic that I was talking about before. Take time to make your observations this week, or take as much time as you feel you need, because it's much more important to make kind of considered decisions, and to take your children with you, and to go slowly with this, rather than kind of implement changes that aren't going to last because they've kind of arisen out of a kind of panic or worry. And I do understand if you do feel slightly panicky about it, but it's okay, you've got time. It really isn't about this week, next week, or even next month. It's just about making steps. And I think the first steps are just to start observing things. Observe your children, observe yourself. And here are the six questions that I'm going to invite you to ask yourself this week. So the first one is this: remember, it starts with you. And children, I repeat this, I say this practically every video or blog, but children take their cue from us. So the first question is this: are you happy with your own habits regarding screen use? Do you turn on your phone first thing, or look at your phone first thing? And I totally hold my hand up and say that I actually did this until very recently. And I was with a group of women around a campfire this weekend, which was great actually. And this topic came up and everybody was agreeing, yeah, this is what they do first thing in the morning. And one person said, which I thought was really valid, she said, when you don't do that, you kind of create your own space, your own vibe, which is not just kind of, it's not because you've opened it up and seen something that you kind of then are in a certain mood. And I think that's really true, because I just recently, maybe in the last 6 weeks or so, I haven't been turning my phone on first thing, because I've made some tweaks to my morning routine. And there's that moment where I suddenly remember, oh, and yes, and there's my phone too. And I really kind of appreciate this time that I've had, which hasn't had, the influences of Facebook and what so-and-so is doing, or the email and what so-and-so is saying. And so I recommend that. But first of all, this week, we're just asking ourselves that question, aren't we? Are you happy with your own habits regarding screens? Because children are copying us. Number 2, are you happy with the habits that your children have? And in order to kind of give yourself a sense of this, because sometimes it can be difficult to know, would you be happy if those habits were to continue in the same way as they are, or even grow in the same direction that they are growing in 2 to 3 years' time? So, for example, if you're using screens at meal times, would you be happy if this was still the case 2 or 3 years down the line? So that's another question. Number 3, how available are you to connect with your children, either during screens or at other times when you're just hanging out at home? Yeah, how much do you feel that you're kind of available? When I say not available, I mean available to kind of interact. How present do you feel you are at those times? Number 4, has your child developed passions for other alternative activities that don't involve a screen? This is a really key one. Have they developed other interests and passions that they really love? Number 5, have you attempted to set limits around screens? And if so, have you done it collaboratively with your children? And number 6, what information does the whereabouts of your screens and your devices, your remotes and things like that, give to your children about the use of screens and devices in your home? So for what I mean by this is, are screens in every room freely available? Are the remote controls out? What's the physical layout saying? Okay, so those are your 6 questions. I really recommend having a ruminate on them, seeing what you come up with. And I'll be back on Monday next week, sharing some next steps that will help you find a way forward that feels good to you and good to your children. So all the best to you and lots of love. Bye.